Happy June and happy Pride. Celebrating Pride in all of us. All this month, Richard Skipper celebrates those that are making a difference in the LGBTQ community. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Monday, everyone. Happy Pride. Happy June. Happy belated Father's Day. Happy summer. Happy whatever it is that you're celebrating today. Welcome to Richard Skipper Celebrates. My show is all about celebrating artists and their body of worth. What makes a great artist? How do they get from point A to point B and beyond? I am very, very, very excited about today's guest. Miles Phillips is an old dear friend of mine, and I don't mean old chronologically. I mean, I'm a lot older than he is. I've been around a lot longer, but I've known Miles for well over 25 years. Miles and I, along with Parker Scott, who we remember dearly today, we did a show years ago called Carol Channing Plus Two. I won a MAC award for my portrayal of Carol Channing, but one of the plus two was Miles Phillips. And I was so happy working with him that years later, when I did another incarnation of my Richard Skipper Celebrates Carol Channing show, I asked him to direct. He did, and that show was a success. When my husband Danny and I got married, Miles Phillips was our best man. He sang Moon River at our wedding, which was the song that won the Academy Award the year that I was born. We will talk about all those things later. I have not seen Miles in over 10 years. I am so thrilled that he said yes today. I haven't seen you since our wedding, but it is so good to see you. And you haven't aged a bit, although I have.
God love you for the liar that you are. Isn't that what our parents used to say? I don't know.
Yes. But I have to tell everyone, Miles and I have nicknames for each other, so you may hear those nicknames today. Mm-hmm. I am Muzzy, and he is Millie from Thoroughly Modern Millie. Miles, before we jump into everything that's been going on in your life and everything, all this month I am celebrating Gay Pride Month. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you, what does Pride personally mean to you?
Ooh. Good question. And sorry, I'll keep looking at you because I just missed your face. So it's so nice to see you. What does Pride mean to me? It means a lot. I feel very blessed to have grown up in a home where there was no such thing as shame. And I think my mom did the math very early. I did the math very early. I was like 4 when I realized when I had a crush on Charmian Carr and John Davidson. I went, oh, that's a thing. And who was on your show? I saw that show.
Thank you.
But throughout my life, there was no real need to hide, etc. You know, I did like everybody else growing up. I was careful about what I said to whom and when, because that was the world we lived in. But I made a conscious decision when I moved to New York. And I had been out since undergrad, but that I was going to add gay content to any conversation that was being had at work or wherever. When people were talking about what they did that weekend, I would say, oh yeah, my boyfriend and I did, and I would throw that in there, just so that people knew they knew someone. Because I think that has a lot, I think that is what Pride is about in a lot of ways, is making sure that you're visible. God knows it's about the incredible loss that we've had and the incredible tragedies and travails that we've had to go through. But it's also about being proud of who you are and not letting people erase you. So
Well,
that
this, I mean, the flip side of that, was there ever a time in your life where you did feel that you had to be invisible? Was there ever a time in your life where you were not proud of who you are? And what were the circumstances that surrounded that?
wow, cut right to it, don't you, Lizzie? I certainly, I don't think I ever experienced the kind of bullying that some people did. I was very fortunate to grow up very, very adept at a lot of different things. So I fit in a lot of different categories going through school. So I had lots of friends across lots of different platforms. But there was a bit of bullying. But I think I remember, and it's something that I still hold on to, which is weird. I was working as a professional actor at the Denver Center, God, a million years ago, back in the 80s and late 80s. And there was an actor that I was very fond of. I liked him a lot, and he was really talented. There were a bunch of other group of his close friends who were really tight with him, and I was tighter with them. And he would just drop, awful stuff in my lap, just hateful stuff for no particular reason, in the dressing rooms, whatever, just, dropping the F-bomb and whatever. And I just let it happen. I didn't speak out. One, because it was the workplace, but two, because it was a workplace full of people that I really adored, and I didn't want to make it about me. It reminds me of, there was a story back, remember Grey's Anatomy? Well, how can you forget? It's still on. But there was an actor on Grey's Anatomy who essentially outed T.R. Knight and said some terrible things about him, and again, dropped the F-bomb a lot. And T.R. took it. I mean, he didn't step up to his own defense. Other people did. So I understand that. I felt for him, and that was, 25 years after my situation. There are times when it feels like you can't really, it's not worth the effort of making a bigger deal out of it. That said, there is a phenomenon in all minority categories, really, where people drop minor things into a conversation, which essentially reminds you that you're marginalized. And you have to choose how to navigate that. A good example is the movie Get Out, if you've ever watched Get Out, which is a brilliant movie. But it's full of all those little microaggressions. And you see people talking about, Obama was my favorite president, et cetera, and we experience those things in the LGBTQ community as well. People saying you're the most amazing person they've ever met or whatever, but do they invite you to something? No, maybe not, because who knows why. In my case, it's because I'm a terrible person, but in most cases, it's because they think, oh, well, this isn't really the right mix, and so we still deal with that. Yeah.
Well, now that you are older, as we both are, do you speak out when you hear those little things that are said? I remember one time I had a couple over for dinner, and the husband of this couple made a comment that to this day I regret not speaking out on, and it was about race. It wasn't anything LGBTQ. Related, it was about race, and I found it offensive, but I didn't speak out because I didn't want to make the evening uncomfortable. But have you been in a situation like that? And now that you're older, would you speak out if someone says or does anything that crosses the line?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I have, spending 25 years in New York, I certainly became a take no prisoners kind of guy, just like all the rest of us. And if I saw an injustice, I would say something. I came to the defense of young ladies on the subway with a guy catcalling across the tracks, thinking there was no recourse. And so I started catcalling him, and he looked shocked as could be. And as the train pulled in, and it was just those two ladies a door away from me, we walked in, and she was like, because he had no idea how to deal with somebody objectifying him sexually and against his will, etc. So, and I've I've said some pretty blue things on the streets that I shouldn't repeat on your show. But yeah, I've called people out, and I will. But there are times when, yeah, I suppose we do temper it. This is not specifically LGBT related, but maybe related. But we just had our first observation of Juneteenth nationally, which was fabulous, and an important step. But it was a step, and it was a thing. It doesn't mean that we fixed racism in America. But I was very, somebody asked in the chat group that I'm a part of on Facebook, very progressive sort of thing, and somebody said, "Is it okay to say Happy Juneteenth?" And I had already sort of come to terms with that and asked a few friends, not specifically about Happy Juneteenth, but we say Happy Memorial Day, we say Happy Labor Day, we say Happy lots of things, because there is an element of celebration going on.
But we do celebrate the fact that, they were finally free. And yes, my feeling about all this is I pray to God that the reparations that everyone deserves are in their future. Sooner rather than later. Among other things that we are celebrating this month, yesterday was Father's Day. Is your father still around?
Oh, no. He died before I was 2.
Wow.
Yeah. But beyond that, my mother divorced him before I was born. Brilliant man, incredibly accomplished musician and English teacher on top of that. He was professor of English and of music. And but a mean drunk. He was never physically violent, but he had a razor sharp wit, which I've inherited, I think. And she was very pregnant with me, and he was not stepping up and being a husband. And she was very accomplished in her chosen career, and she didn't need him. And she basically said, "I don't need you to raise this child," and she divorced him. And I only met him once. Wow. I have a photo of him. He came to visit me. I grew up way up in Northern California in the Trinity Mountains. And he came to visit, and apparently I knew who he was. And, because I called him Dad or Daddy or whatever, and I was like 1.5 or something. And there's a picture, the only one I think that exists is the two of us sitting out in the garden out back, and he's smoking. And I'm standing next to him in all red. My mother dressed me in red, which I still to this day don't like to wear. I know you love red. But I'm pointing toward heaven, and he's smoking. He died in a horrific accident. He was down in Baton Rouge teaching at not Baton Rouge, New Orleans, I don't know, but LSU. And he had gone to the dentist, and my great aunt had actually driven him to and from the dentist because he had a lot of dental work done. And apparently the drugs from all the oral surgery combined with, he got home and poured himself a drink. He sat down on the edge of his bed and put some Chopin on and started to smoke, and he fell asleep and woke up. So no dad. But I was raised by an incredible
How old were you when that happened?
I was under 2. It's funny. I knew. I was about to tell you a John story, but I better not. But I knew that John and I were about the same age. John Kennedy, for kids who don't know. And his father and my father died about the same time. And I just remember that I remember seeing him on the TV during the funeral and the little salute thing, and somehow associating that with my father dying. That was about as much as it registered for me. That.
And did your mom remarry?
No. She grew up in the Bay Area in Berkeley. Her mother was the first woman, or one of the first women, to graduate from Berkeley with a law degree. And her father, my grandfather, was an engineer on both the Bay Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge. And so she was very aware, and she was a single child, and they died, her mother when my mom was 14 and her father when she was 16. So she was very aware of being an only child. And so she didn't want me to be an only child. So she adopted twice. But because of her position in the medical community, she was able to do it. That was something you really couldn't do in the 60s and 70s, was adopt a child as a single mother, but she managed to do it. And so she made sure that I had a family, which is great. And but she was the closest male influence I have. I've joked about this, was Mildred the housekeeper. She was pretty much. She was like Alice on steroids. No, I'm kidding. She was a tiny little woman, but she definitely had her masculine traits. Yeah.
Well, God bless your mom. She sounds so progressive for the time that she was living in. I mean, was your mom at all in the arts?
She was. In fact, her goal when she was growing up, she danced ballet from an early age. She actually danced with the San Francisco Ballet on Point when she was young. And then she was studying piano and cello. Her plan was to become a concert cellist. And when her parents died as a teen, she was taken in by her uncle, who was a doctor in San Francisco. And she fell in love with medicine. And so she decided to go to nursing school at the French hospital in San Francisco. And that set her on an entirely different path. But she continued to play piano at church, and it was the music choral director and things like that. And we had family sing-alongs around the piano every Saturday. Couldn't have been more of a cliche, but that was a very true thing for me. It's probably one of the reasons that I'm not really comfortable singing at parties now, because there was a whole element of, stand at the piano and sing for grandmother sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And so I need to have a couple of drinks in me and or be with people that I really love to do that kind of thing. I'm not a karaoke guy.
You and I are pretty much the same age, give or take a year. I think I'm older than you are.
I think but yeah.
I think we're the same age. In 1964, was it that your life changed when you were introduced to Mary Poppins? And
somebody's done her research. Yeah. That, again, growing up, I was on my own. I had a sister by then. My brother had not been born until 68. But I'd seen Mary Poppins. I have no memory of seeing it, at first release, but that was my first movie. And then we went to Baton Rouge to visit my great aunts and to meet my grandmother for the first time. And it was like Easter break. And we went to a Saturday matinee of the Sound of Music film at this beautiful old movie palace called Robert E. Lee, with crystal chandeliers and marble staircases and all this stuff. And I was just enchanted and sitting on the front row of the balcony, just watching this. And Julie Andrews comes up over the hill and starts singing. And I went, oh, I get it. Same person, different person. You get to sing. This is what I'm going to do. And so I was just, glued to the screen. And on the way home in the car, I was like the classic 4-year-old going, and remember when, and remember when, and remember when. And all through dinner, the aunts finally went to bed. They were, in their 60s or 70s by then. And mom was tucking me into bed, and I'm still, and remember when, and remember when. And she's like, boy, you really loved that movie, didn't you? And I was like, oh, yes. She goes, you want to go again? Yes. And she goes, get up and get dressed. And we went and caught the last screening. She goes, you can fall asleep. It's like, no, I won't. And I did not. And I was in the score on the way home. Yeah.
Well, for me, it was the other Cinderella. It was Leslie Ann Warren. I mean, she made such an impact on me. And I guess, as I look back on it, I probably too, had a crush on Stuart Damon and Leslie Ann Warren. Yes. I still do have a big crush on Leslie Ann Warren.
Yeah, me too.
But I want to go back to when you were a kid in school. Were you exposed to the arts in school? Did you go to a school that had a great arts program? When did it start for you that you actually appeared on a stage for the first time? And do you recall what that moment was like for you?
Sure. Let me quick back, only because it's LGBT week or month on your show. Speaking of Leslie Ann Warren and how cool my mother was, I was obsessed with Cinderella. And I just mentioned that I wanted a pair of glass slippers, and no, she didn't bat an eye. And just a week later showed up coming home from work with a pair of those little lucite high heels with the black elastic strap that went over the top. And I wore them for a hot second just to see what it was like. And then I threw them away or gave them to my sister or something. But I just, wanted to try it. And she knew.
Or lost them on a stairway somewhere.
Yeah, no. I learned also pretty early on. I wasn't built for drag. I'm just yeah. I'll leave it to the professionals. It's not pretty on me. But I knew when we moved to the Wine Valley by the time I was 7, 8-ish or something like that, and I'd heard they were doing The Sound of Music in a neighboring town. And I was a Cub Scout, and we were raising horses, so I lived a very rural California kind of life on a ranch. And I heard they were doing The Sound of Music, and I informed my mother that she was going to drive me to the auditions because I was going to be playing Kurt. And I got it. And from that point on, I did a couple shows after I did Oliver and Amal, and then kind of went into classic grade school life. I remember also in school, a group of boy friends and I was probably around 11, had decided we were going to do a production of The Wizard of Oz for the school. It was whatever, but we were certainly going to make it happen. And Mom took me to a dress maker to get me fitted for a gingham dress because I was going to be playing Dorothy. She knew it was not going to go anywhere. It was just us, exploring or whatever. And I realized in retrospect, I only hit this realization a couple of years ago. I went, oh, it's not that I wanted to wear the dress. It's I wanted the best role. I wanted good numbers. I coveted Nancy in Oliver because she had the best song. And years later, I sang it at a fundraiser benefit for Marcus Simeon and Gregory, and finally got to scratch that itch. But yeah, I started very early. It's the answer to your question.
Now, as you're going through school, I mean, it's one thing to do it as a hobby. A lot of people do that, but it's a completely different thing when you say, this is the life that I'm going to lead. What was the defining moment for you when you said, I'm going to pursue this as a career?
I was very lucky growing up in that, for whatever, it means nothing now because my brain is dead. I can't remember my own name sometimes. But at the time, I had ridiculously high IQ and could do pretty much anything except, that I dabbled in. And that was kind of my approach to life, is I would do whatever I wanted to do while it was fun. I'm moving this because I realize I'm not centered. Sorry about that. And all the way through high school, the plan was to become a doctor. I grew up in a medical family. I had been an orderly / nurse's aide in high school. Loved medicine and loved all of that. And I was very scientifically oriented, so that worked too. And so I started undergrad here at University of Hawaii, actually, as in psych pre-med. But I was doing shows at the same time and taking arts courses. And I didn't change my major. I transferred to K-State because I fell in love right before I moved from the mainland. And so that was back before cell phones. So phone bills were insane. So I followed my heart to Kansas State University, and I did tons of shows there. But I was also student teaching principles of biology, and I was, doing both things. And I decided I was doing summer rep up in Duluth, Minnesota, between my junior and senior year. And I realized how much I loved it. And I said, okay, I'm going to audition for ACT in San Francisco, which was, one of the premier acting programs at the time. And because things came to me very easily. I auditioned well, was young, blonde, pretty, had a great voice, all that stuff. So I was just easily cast. Didn't mean that I was any good. It just meant that I was easily cast, I think. So I got in, amazingly. And it's a very, very exclusive program. They only take a handful of people. So I decided, because I went up in the fall of that next year to Chicago to audition, and I got in. And so I changed my major between my first semester and my second semester of my senior year to theater. So I have a Bachelor of Science in theater. And from that point on, there was really no turning back. And, again, good training, whatever, but I managed to work pretty consistently. And when I wasn't working, I was able to find other creative outlets, and I was good at a lot of stuff. So doesn't mean I've never really had another career. Mm-hmm. It's just been day jobs and making it work until the next job.
Well, how did the decision to move to New York happen? And that was how many years ago?
That was it's, I guess 30 now at this point.
Yeah,
I was seeing a woman in Chicago. I can't go into too much more detail, and decided to move to New York. And I had.
Wait a minute. I'm not going to question you're seeing the woman in Chicago.
Right.
I'm going to question the fact that you were seeing a woman in Chicago, but decided to move to New York.
She lived in New York as well.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, it was not being clear. Out of discretion, sorry. And I had, like an idiot, like a Californian, had opted to move to Chicago from Denver when it was time to start freelancing as opposed to working with a rep company. Mm-hmm. Decided to do Chicago because I thought it would be less frigid. And I'm like an idiot. It lived right on the lake and froze my ass off for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so when I finally moved to New York, I just took to it like a fish to water. And so yeah.
Did the woman that you were seeing? You said she lived in New York.
Uh-huh.
Did you move in with her, or?
Yeah, okay. She had a place. Again, like more detail than I should go into. But yeah, she had a place there, and then she moved back to Chicago, and I met Antonio, who you know, and we were outrageously happy and sickeningly perfect together for 7 or 8 years, and then we weren't, and that's just how those things work sometimes.
Well, backing up for a moment, how long did it take you? First of all, when you came to New York, had you ever been to New York prior to that?
No. I remember there was at one point in high school when they were planning a senior or a drama club trip or whatever to New York, and I was all about it. And I was shopping. I needed to have the perfect trench coat and all the things that you thought New York was supposed to be. And I was ready to go see all the shows and different suits and all that kind of stuff. And then it didn't happen. So. That was the closest I got until I moved there. And my first show that I saw on Broadway was Falsettos, which couldn't have been a more perfect show. Mm-hmm. I had, and shortly after that, I was offered Falsettos in Chicago. And okay, it's a good story. I had been, you're not going to have to work at all, Richard. I'm just going to keep talking. Okay. I was at the Gap on 86th and Broadway. I had I remember walking through the store. I was going to Gap Kids, and there was this. But I walked in on the corner at Gap, and walking the other direction was Faith Prince, and there was like this display of leather coats and mannequins in the middle. And I'm walking by in my head, going, "Oh my God, it's Faith Prince! Oh my God, it's Faith Prince! Oh my God, it's Faith Prince!"
Now, this was the time that she was doing Falsettos.
Shortly after, because it was like I would say 94-ish,
right?
And so I'm walking the other direction and muttering under. I wasn't saying it out loud, but saying, "Oh my God, it's Faith Prince!" And I got around and I peeked over my shoulder, and she'd stopped and was staring at me. And I was like, "Did I say that out loud?" And she goes, "What?" I said, "Did I say, 'Oh my God, that's Faith Prince' out loud?" She goes, "No, but I know you." And so we stopped and talked, and I got some advice from her about what to do as far as falsettos. I ended up not going because I couldn't really afford to go, but which is unfortunate. But years later, when I won the MAC Award for Male Vocalist, probably in 2008, she was the presenter, she and Tom Wopat, who was like a 6 Degrees person for me. But I had not seen Faith in all those years. And she leans in and gives me this kiss on the upstage side. She goes, "It's such an honor to give this to you." And I went, "Oh my God, you!" And then after backstage, I said, "Do you remember meeting me?" She goes, "No, when?" And so I told her. She goes, "Oh my God, I remember that." But at the time, she had no idea who I was. But yeah,
it's so funny because I got my MAC Award that same night, And my MAC award was presented to me by Tom Wopat. And
so we were like right after each other, I'm guessing. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, that's very funny. I want to go back and ask, how long did it take you to get acclimated in New York? How long did it take you to feel that New York was now your home? And did you know how to play the game as far as auditions and everything when you first came here? Or how did you learn all of that?
Oh, Lord. I was a great auditioner. And I had auditioned for a lot of like national tours and things in Chicago. When I went to my first audition for My Fair Lady, I think, the revival, I want to say Jeff Johnson it was Johnson Liff. I don't remember. It was either that or Sunset Boulevard, which I had several callbacks for as well. But Jeff was like, I'm so glad you're here, because they'd seen me in Chicago. And so that all went well. But my challenge was, Kay Callum wrote a terrific book, incredible character actress, and it was titled "How to Sell Yourself from New York to LA and Everywhere in Between." And it was about, one of the key things I took away from it was make sure that you have a nest, make sure that you have a home, because you're going to be making rounds all day, et cetera, and experience rejection and go home. So you need to make sure that you love being home. And because I had always been self-sufficient, I put myself through school, et cetera. I took that to heart. So I had a really good day job, which kind of interfered with my auditioning more. So I was a bit lazy until I got an agent, that I rarely got up to go to an open call. And so unless I had a slot, that's when I would go. Mm-hmm. So as far as discipline, I'm not one of those people. My career might have been different. I also think I have zero regrets about my career, but unless something was handed to me, essentially, then I'd go and do it. But I needed to already have jumped over the hurdles of being seen. Mm-hmm. And I've lost my train of thought because that's how old I am. But as far as it was representation that sort of changed things for me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm a great auditioner, and but maybe not so much anymore because I don't sing anymore. But I also don't audition. There's nothing really to audition for out here. But that's
Miles. Let's face it. I mean, you had a very successful career here in New York as a singer. Why is it that you're no longer singing? Is it because of not having a constant practice with it? What happened?
Part of it, I think, yeah. I love my home. I have a floor in a beautiful 1940s bungalow that overlooks Honolulu. It's incredible. I turned the laptop up. We'd never find each other again. So incredible view. And I moved here really to third act it. I didn't come here to pursue my career. I knew that there was no equity work and only a bit of TV. And so that wasn't really, I came with no plans to further my career. That said, once I got settled in, work started just coming my way. And I had approached coming to Honolulu with the idea that I was going to be open to the universe. I was not going to come from the mainland and try to say, well, in New York, we do it this way. I was going to be very open to the Hawaiian approach to life, mm-hmm. and which is very much about letting the universe have its say. So that kept me sane. It still keeps me sane. Mm-hmm. And it was exactly what I needed to do. I had, for years, had said that I would, when I was done with everything, I would move to Hawaii, and I don't care if I had to rent surfboards on the beach. That's or work with dolphins I want to work with dolphins. Didn't do either of those things, but I just had a window of opportunity in New York where I was between jobs, and it's like, okay, I've got a nest egg. Now's the time. If I don't, I'm going to be 80 working the fry machine at McDonald's. It used to kill me walking up. I worked for many years down on Wall Street, and for my day job. And I remember walking up the subway stop on Wall, and there was this elderly woman working her way up those stairs every single day on her way to work. And it killed me. because that's the world that we were living in New York. And this world we live in now anywhere. Don't get me started on society and inequity. But yeah, so I didn't want to be that. I knew that I would much rather be poor and unemployed in Hawaii than in New York.
Yes.
Luckily, it hasn't worked out that way. I've been fine. So that's good. But I had met that. I did that with resolve. It was very difficult to decide to make that move. So many people, you included, that I just adored in New York. And I miss you all.
Well, we miss you too. I mean, everyone's tuning in today. But I want to go back again to New York. I know you primarily through the world of cabaret. Yeah. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people who probably know you primarily through the world of theater. When you look at those two plates that you juggled there, which plate is the most fulfilling for you?
They've gone hand in hand for most of my adult life. I remember I was working at the Denver Center and did a show at the Senate Lounge just to scratch a different itch. And even when I was here in Hawaii in undergrad, I did a couple of things, doing a couple of sets at clubs, basically to address things in my head, or do a different creative outlet that beyond what's structured in a theater piece. And so when I was in Chicago, I was doing Noises Off, and I was doing a cabaret show. And I was at there was a store there called The Drum, which is like apothecary, and it had everything, including makeup and things like that for theater people. And I was standing in line behind a woman who was getting really unfair treatment from the guy at the register about writing a check. And it was Dorothy Loudon. And she was like, wow. I'm staying at the Belmont. And I stood up for her and I said, do you have any idea who this is? And so they took her check. And I hung out and looked at some cards down at the front. And she walked by and she goes, thank you. And I said, it's my pleasure. She goes, clearly you're an actor. How in the hell do you know me? And what are you doing? And,
sounds like her. Yes.
Yeah. And I said I was doing Noises Off, and on my day off I was doing a Nightclub Act. And she goes, oh, get out of cabaret now. It almost ruined my career. And I took that to heart. And I didn't do any more cabaret in Chicago. And then I had done the Fantastics in Arkansas. And Mark Janis was our MD. And I played Matt at 32 with my dear old friend, Rob Langater, my best friend for decades now. And we had first met doing the Fantastics in Chicago. I had been brought in to cover El Gallo because their El Gallo was giving them grief. And they said, who in Chicago can learn El Gallo in a day? And everybody went, Miles Phillips. So they called me in, and I was playing El Gallo to Rob's Matt. But I never had to go on. The guy cleaned up his act the minute I showed up. And so years later, Rob had started a theater company in Arkansas and asked me to serve as artistic director. So I did that and cast a lot of great people from New York because I lived there already. And so I was playing Matt at 32 and he was playing El Gallo, younger than me, but it was okay. It worked out fine. Mm-hmm. And so I met Mark and instant connection. And then he was coming through New York on his way to another gig somewhere. And his car broke down, if memory serves. Mm-hmm. There, correct me if I'm wrong. But he decided to hang out and make some money working at a nightclub, cabaret club. And said, come sing. I was like, oh, I don't do that. And he goes, no, come sing. And so I did. And I would hang out there, and I met Annie Hughes, fell madly in love with her, and convinced me to do a show. So I did a Christmas show, and I asked Annie to guest with me, which was incredible. And that kind of Stu Hamstra came and started writing nice things. And so it's like, okay, I guess I'll do a show. And I waited until like 1999, I think, to do that one. Because for me, they, as opposed to other people who like rattle off shows and do 2-3 a year, I do one every 3 or 4 years. They need to be about something. They're not autobiographical, or rarely, but they help me process stuff. And so it gives me a chance to dig deep and explore my themes, and then pull back just a little bit and make it a little more universal. And so it serves as a little bit of therapy, but mostly just a way to scratch a different itch. And so from that point on, I loved it, and I approached it as an art form and a way to address who I was and what I wanted of society. So they were entertaining, but they weren't laugh riots.
No, they were wonderful shows. I want to go back to Dorothy Loudon for a moment. She told you that Cabaret almost destroyed her career.
Yeah.
Do you know what she meant at that time? And did you believe her?
I did believe her. I don't know what she meant at the time. I maybe did some math, but it was what I had witnessed in Chicago, certainly, and one of the reasons I stepped away from it, I called it the smoky gin joint circuit, because you did your show, but then you had to hang out and schmooze with people. And it was a smoky bar, and everybody was drinking, and you could easily become addicted to something. And my father was an alcoholic. I was very careful about drinking for most of my adult life. Now I drink like a fish, but only at night, just a nightcap. But if I quit with the bourbon, I'd lose 20 pounds, but that's life. Right now you need to drink to sleep. So I think it had something to do with the distractions of that. Plus, when you're working at night, you don't want to get up in the morning and audition.
Well, there's another level to it. I can speak for myself. I mean, it's been now 11 plus almost 12 years since I last, believe it or not, appeared on stage as Carol Channing. And yet it made such an impact at that time that is still the first thing that leads when people think of me. Sure. A lot of people. I mean, there's a whole generation of people out there who don't know me for that work and everything. And I think that once you are seen in that light, it's hard for people to see you. Obviously, I was performing as Carol Channing, right. But even in the case of Dorothy Loudon, she brought to her nightclub work all of the elements that made her Dorothy Loudon. And when that is so ingrained in people's minds, it's difficult for people to let go and see her playing a real, a legitimate character or something beyond Dorothy Loudon. Right. But I want to ask you also, what was the show that got you your equity card?
Oh, Lord. I think, because I put it off like a lot of people, coming up out of conservatory, because you know that you're going to be competing with people your own age and they're going to hire the cheaper guy. So I put it off as long as I could. I think I went equity doing a show that was tailored for me, a musical version of Penny Serenade in Chicago, and which was extraordinary. I was playing the Cary Grant role, and it was beautiful production. And I think I got my card then. It might have been for Snoopy around that same time. I was playing Charlie Brown, but it was somewhere in the early '90s as opposed to the late '80s. And so I came to New York with my card and ready to go. And at the time, there was a fair amount of equity tours. There aren't that many anymore. So I have friends who have yet to go equity. They have done. They've worked for their entire careers, but they've done non-equity because there's work, Well,
I was going to ask you, and of course, the time that you came to New York and everything is a factor as well. Yeah. Do you feel that the equity card actually was a hindrance, or if it was a benefit to you?
Excellent question. I don't know that I know the answer. I think, again, because of my nature, I think I've always been very pick and choose. I was never really seen for chorus. I would try. There were times that I would love to have been in the chorus of something. Back in Chicago again, I auditioned multiple times for two of the leads in Anyone Can Whistle, and they were doing a big production there. And after the show had been cast, and I really thought I was going to get shooed. And the artistic director called me the next day and said, "You want to have lunch?" And I was like, sure, so I went to have lunch, and she was just praising and saying all sorts of great things to me at the audition. She goes, "I want to tell you this now. You're never going to get a chorus work." And I was like, what? And she goes, no, you're just, you're 100% alive. And I said, I can pull it back. He goes, no, it's not about, don't change a thing, but you're so alive. I can't watch anybody but you on stage. You're just so full. And it's like, wow. And she goes, but don't change it. Just accept the fact that you're not going to be in the ensemble. Okay. So I didn't really fight for that. Yeah, so my equity card really was just a way to make sure that I was getting paid well, or getting paid fairly.
Now, you said earlier, in your own words, that you did not have the discipline that most people have in terms of getting up, going to auditions and everything. Was there ever, and a lot of things, you just went after what you wanted, and sometimes you got them, sometimes you didn't. Was there ever a period over the course of time that you were in New York that you found yourself being aggressively ambitious?
I honestly don't think so. I think when I first started getting some acknowledgement for my nightclub stuff, I was maybe concerned that I didn't think people liked me or whatever, because again, I wasn't razzle dazzle, but I was secure in what I was doing. The great Lenny Watt said to me at one point, he said, "You're a brand. Don't change what you're doing." It's like, oh, okay, so I'm a brand. Great. And I think, you, God love you, you went to bat for me. You made sure that people knew who I was, and I got invited to the right events and things like that. But I was never a schmoozer. I'm great at a party and I love everybody, but I'd much rather stay home. And I'm not one to go out and shake everybody's hand and network. My networks come from the people that I've already worked with, as opposed to, I want to meet you, here's my card. That's just never been me. And so I had the career that I deserved, for whatever that means. I'm very proud of the accomplishments and and for the thing. I've also had a great recording career, which has been terrific. So lots to look back at, and lots of things that have fueled the work that I'm doing here now. So yeah, I'm no disillusionment, and no, I chose love for a good chunk of time. I was the breadwinner, and so yeah, that, and I still choose.
And I want to ask, I know that you're an award, you're a MAC award winner. You've won other awards as well. Was there a moment when you were living here in New York that you felt that you had made it, that you had arrived? Or did you feel that you were always grasping for the brass ring?
I never really felt like I was grasping for brass ring. And I again, blessed that things came my way. I remember there was a critic, guy, but I remember he wrote something. He was talking about like the who's who in cabaret and like what was coming up for the awards or whatever. And I just remember reading the article, and at some point he was basically implying that I was going to win, but it was because I was popular or something. And then he came and saw the show and wrote a retraction. He goes, "Okay, I'm wrong. I've never been more wrong about it in my life, but I never felt particularly popular." I have not looked at the comment thread because I turn into grandpa trying to program the VCR.
Well, I'll read it to you afterwards.
But yeah. But hi everybody, but I don't know what's going on. So I absolutely have never been about seeking popularity, and I've never felt particularly popular. I've always felt the people who love and respect my work love and respect my work.
I know that you also, you talked about this earlier as well, you found that window of time when you felt it's now or never that you make the leap from New York to Hawaii. And I remember when you first told me, I was like, I was shocked, first of all. I couldn't believe that you were going to leave New York, because I had the opposite response to your career that you did. I thought that you were very popular and you were much loved in the cabaret community, still are. But you made that move did you make the move and put all of your ducks in a row before you told anyone? Or did you drop hints that you were thinking of leaving? I
stewed on it for quite a while, and without getting too deep about it, but I mean, I also, there was a turn for me at the beginning of the new century that post 9/11, that all kind of like hit. They were like a triple whammy. My mother died, who was incredibly dear to me. I had been doing The Sound of Music out in Ashland, and had took the gig because it was next to her, so she could come and see me, and I could spend time with her. No sooner did I get back to New York, but I got the call saying, "Honey, you should come back." So I did, and I was there to hold her hand and sing to her, which was great. And then 9/11 happened, and then my marriage fell apart, and it was like boom, 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 and I kind of lost joy, I suppose. Because I'm really technically proficient, and an artist at heart. I managed to keep making the work, and some of my best creative work came out of that period of real despair, and a lot of people didn't know that was going on, but it was, and so I'd stopped really loving a lot of elements of my life. I loved the people, I loved the work, but I hated schmoozing. I hated begging people to come see shows. I hated marketing, for theater. It was all, a thing. I love the creative process. I still love directing. I still love acting. But the aspect of building a nightclub act is harder for me because I bare my soul in everything that I do. I haven't done a songbook show since I was 27. I just not. Yeah. So the closest I came to doing songbook show was doing Carol Channing +2 with you when we just did Julie Stein and Jerry Herman. But for the most part, I build a show, and you build it from your heart, and you cry and bleed into it all, and then, like all good acting work, you throw it over your shoulder and you tell the truth, and you share. So that was a great way to, process what I was going through. But there came a time, again, with that window of time, where I said, "Oh, good, I don't have to die here." And so I took that opportunity, and I didn't know how long I'd be here. I just knew it was, I knew that it would be for life, but I didn't have any idea how long that life would be. But it's blossomed. I'm in love again. And so yeah, there's good stuff going on. Lots of creative stuff.
I want to say that we miss you very much here. We're going to be wrapping up in a moment, but I've got some random questions that I've pulled. These are questions that some people have sent to me. They're not questions that are aimed directly at you. They're just general life questions. And so the first question I want to ask is, who is the most amazing person that you know personally, and why?
Wow. I know a lot of amazing people. I think because of the community, and whether it be theater or cabaret, it takes an awful lot of resolve to stay sane and make work happen. You are way up on that list, my dear friend.
Thank you.
You've made multiple careers happen with great success, and I worship that. I'm so impressed by it. You work harder than anybody in show business, I think, and certainly harder than I ever have, and I richly admire that. So yeah, boy. It's all about people do amazing things for different things. I love people who change the world and make the world a better place. So short of that, it's hard to put my finger on one person.
That's great. What is the most, this is a good one. What is the most deserved praise that you've ever received?
I never get praise, Richard. No, I'm kidding.
I'll praise you.
Yeah, I'm kidding. I get way too much praise. That's my biggest problem. Tough one. There have been, remember the first time somebody called me an artist, really landed. It was Mark Janis, actually.
Do you call yourself an artist?
I do, because I feel like, I'm not just a singer. I'm not just an actor. I'm not a trombone player, which I am. But I spent a lot of work digging deeper than I needed to be a better actor than I necessarily needed to be. Mm-hmm. And I remember, again, Mark, first time we ever worked together, it wasn't until years later that we were working on a show together. And he said, I need to tell you something. And he said, when I first met you, I just thought you were another blonde actor. And he said, you're an artist. And it hit me like, boom, right in the middle of the chest, because I've always felt I was an artist, but yeah, the appearances, now that I'm old and fat and,
please.
But that meant something. And the other thing that really resonated with me is my mom, God love her, she would drive me to auditions and she would come and cheer things, but she never ever was a stage mom for me. Mm-hmm. And she basically kind of watched it with a bit of reserve and bemused and pride. And she said to me at one point, she goes, I was, for years and years and years, I was your mother, or you were my son. And now I'm your mother. When anybody says, are you Miles Phillips' mother? And she goes, that's the biggest change in my life that I couldn't have been more proud of, is that I'm no longer Noreen Phillips. I'm Miles Phillips' mother. It's like, oh, wow. So
beautiful.
Yeah, that. Okay. So that.
So what's the most constructive argument that you've ever had?
Ooh. Sorry, I'm actually looking at the beach right now, but I don't.
Jealous about that.
No, I don't have real arguments. I debate, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think in retrospect, in the last year, I've become much more aware of some of my privilege, as we all have. Mm-hmm. I was married to a Dominican. I had all sorts of opinions on whether or not I should be participating in Dominican culture, etc. And I think some of our conversations with my ex about my willingness to assimilate into another culture, where I felt like I was appropriating, and so it didn't feel right. I think ultimately there were valuable lessons that came out of that made me a better biracial partnership person. My current boyfriend is French Chinese. Mm-hmm. And so I'm learning an awful lot about Asian culture, and French. I'm learning French, yeah. So I think the most useful dialogues have been about me learning to step back and make sure that I'm not leading the conversation.
Great answer.
I'm smart and privileged and figure stuff out. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean I need to be telling everybody what I've learned. I should be sitting back and letting them tell me.
That's a great answer. What is the nicest imperfection in you?
I think the result is nice, but it is an imperfection. I am very invested in my friendships and people that I love, but I'm also very much a hermit. Mm-hmm. I learned years ago that the cool people didn't really, they didn't care what people thought. And so I play a good game of being the cool guy, I think. But I certainly do care. And so I think my therapist years ago, post-divorce, explained that my core belief was it had grown from what all of our mothers teach us, which is if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Mm-hmm. But that became in me, if people aren't saying anything, it's because they don't have anything nice to say. And so I carried a lot of that. It didn't impact how I related with people, but I carried an awful lot of stuff where I was assuming that people didn't like me. And I think that's, as we've learned, that wasn't really true. Mm-hmm. But it made me a very kind person. My mother made me a kind person, I think. But foolishly kind and cutting a lot of slack from people that I maybe shouldn't have. There are a lot of people that I should have told off, and I never did. And that came from that character flaw, where I didn't want to offend, I didn't want somebody to not like me, whatever. So I took a lot of shit that I shouldn't have. That's all.
Okay. And what's the most meaningful compliment that you've ever received? I think you've already told us when one of them with Mark Janis calling you an artist. And when have you been the most supportive of another person? And when do you feel that you've gotten the most support from another person?
I think, again, it's my nature to dig deep and do all the work. So there have been times when I have been huge cook and bottle washer for, if I'm directing a show, I'll do it all because I want to make sure it gets done and it needs to be done right, or whatever. So I will, whatever. And I advocate for my cast and things like that. And so that. But what was the question? I'm sorry. The second part
of that you've been of another person.
Yeah.
So it was respect towards you.
Yeah. So it's my nature to be supportive of the people that I'm working with. I can't help that. As far as when I felt the most supported, again, it's this incredible community of singers in New York. Got you certainly, Sue Matsuki, Katona Bennett, people who. Cynthia and Ted. There are people who kept me sane when I was going through hell, and not letting anybody know it. Certainly, my core group of friends, they saw all sides of me post-divorce, and still managed to love me, which is great. So probably, shout out to Rob and Liz and Jason and Dan and all those people for always having my back. So yeah, that I've never felt unloved.
Well, we do love you. Our time is up. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Stick around after we're finished, and I'll read you the comments.
Thanks.
But anyway, I want to thank everyone for being here today. If you enjoyed the show, if you're here for the first time, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube. My show is about celebrating all artists. And that means people from all walks of life. I feel that there's enough negativity in the world, and I don't want to add to that. So if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe. With today's show, everyone who's watching, please leave a comment on YouTube. Hit the like button and feel free to share this with your friends. That increases the analytics, that increases the visibility of this. And Miles and I, we want an audience. So do whatever you can to get the word out about that. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the third name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message on Facebook, but a phone call. And let that person know what they mean to you. I'm going to get emotional here because we just lost a very dear friend of ours. And I did not know the pain he was going through. I'm sorry. And it's important that we reach out to those people that matter in our lives. Parker, this is for you, and everybody, please, please, please do so. As a dear friend of mine says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And you never know what someone else is going through right now. So my thought to add to that is if you're going to be out in a boat, make sure that you bring Richard Skipper along. You need a skipper on that boat with you. So anyway, I'm going to leave the screen because this is about you, Miles. Millie, you're going to have the final word. Anything that you want to say about anything that we talked about today that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish that we had, or just any message that you want to put out to the world right now. And Millie, You're always worthwhile in my book.
Oh, Muzzy, you're so worthwhile. Raspberries. Boy, I didn't know that you were going to do this to me. Only because, first of all, thank you, Muzzy. This was just been, I'd never expected this. And I had to laugh at the title because there's really no celebration of me. But it sure is a celebration of our friendship. So thank you for that. But I do want to, since it's Pride Month, especially for the people who are allies, just remember to speak up and help and look out for people, whatever the cause and whatever the marginalized group. Remember when you're an ally that you're there to support and as opposed to take the lead. So when, and make sure that people who are not allies find ways to help them to come around. I think we've made great progress in the last, decades, which is great. But now, be a good elder gay if you're among those groups of us who are over 40 or over 50, and remember when. Remind people. Pick some your favorite films and share them with people. Make sure that the young gays know. So that, and again, get out there, see live entertainment. It exists everywhere. Help to nurture it while we're all crawling back from COVID, and support the arts because they make us better humans. Right? Thanks, raspberries.